granting our petition and vacating the lower court orders that had enjoined, basically blocked those laws from taking effect. So that will be action at the U.S. Supreme Court, and that'll be a win for us directly from the U.S. Supreme Court. The AG mentioned the total ban case, which was the SB6 litigation that the legislature passed last session. That one was enjoined, blocked by a district court judge, a federal district court judge here in Little Rock. We appealed that case to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit. That's the court in St. Louis. And that case was also put on hold pending the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs. Now that we have Dobbs, yesterday after the AG signed the certification to allow the trigger law to go into effect, I filed a motion with the 8th Circuit, an emergency motion seeking to vacate the district court injunction blocking the SB6 legislation. We have a total ban in place as a result of the trigger law, but the other law should also go into effect. So right now, we filed a motion with the court. We are waiting for a decision from that court, but it's pretty clear what the result will be. The court will vacate the lower court order. Probably in the next week or so, we hope to get a ruling on that. And then the only other case, go ahead.
So, Nick, I was wondering, have you heard anything from Planned Parenthood or ACLU, any of the other usual suspects? Did they do anything in court that you're aware of yesterday?
So we anticipated they would, and in fact, my staff, we were continuously monitoring local court filings, and we have not seen anything. Much to our surprise, we have not seen anything yet. I think we all sort of assumed, as is true around the country, that a lot of this litigation would shift to state court. But given that Arkansas has a constitutional amendment, I mean, we have Amendment 68 of the Arkansas Constitution that says we do not recognize abortion rights in Arkansas. I guess maybe I'm not somewhat surprised that they didn't file anything in Arkansas, because inevitably, the Arkansas Constitution makes very clear where the state stands on abortion.
But I suppose they could go ahead and file something in the coming days, correct?
They could. We even this weekend, that's one of the things we're doing. We're continuing to monitor things just in case, so that we're ready to go.
This is a little bit of a chess game that we play. We make a move, they make a move. Would you anticipate, if you're feel free talking about it, what would be their next move that you think they would do if the Constitution blocks it out? What other options are we in a checkmate position?
I think we're probably in a checkmate position. I mean, the U.S. Supreme Court made very clear yesterday that the federal Constitution does not recognize the ability to abort an unborn child. And the Arkansas Constitution, again, Amendment 68, makes very clear that the state doesn't recognize it. So really the only option that they have now is probably to seek some type of legislative change. And that one's not really my department. I'll defer to others on that one. But we feel pretty good about the status of the Arkansas Constitution. So at least in federal or state court, in Arkansas, there's not too many places they can go at this point.
Let me ask you about something, because when the ruling came down, can you guys help me out? The Republican lady that's a senator, I think, from up northeast, she said she had been misled, during testimony, which I think is crock of bull. But anyway, and yet she cited, and the news showed the statements that the three conservative judges that have been appointed under Trump made the statement as far as the precedents that had been set, the precedent of 50 years. My question is this. A precedent that has been set for 50 years that was following a determination of the court when Roe versus Wade was originally established, why would 50 years of wrong precedent built on a error of the court 50 years ago be of any value? Would you not want to go back to what these Supreme Court justices have determined was wrong 50 years ago, and everything that's been ruled on it since that time has been wrong as well? That's to you, Nick. If you can answer it.
Well, I think I'd answer by pointing to what the court said. I mean, the court said there's a doctrine in law known as stare decisis, which means that we generally defer to old decisions, previous decisions, because we don't want courts that upset expectations every time the composition of the court changes. And, you know, the court went through an analysis. There are factors the court considers about whether stare decisis applies. And two of those factors, as Justice Alito, I think, very effectively pointed out, are the quality of the reasoning of the original opinion and the workability of whatever the original doctrine was. So in terms of the quality of the reasoning, I mean, as even Casey later recognized, the reasoning was extraordinarily weak. The court in Roe didn't point to anything in either the text of the Constitution, obviously, or in anything in American tradition or history that would have recognized a right to abortion. You know, no state had a constitutional right at the time Roe was decided. In fact, most states, the overwhelming majority of states, criminalized abortion at the time. So, you know, to invent a right sort of the whole cloth, as the court pointed out, basically Roe just made it up as it went along. So the reason was extraordinarily weak. And then in terms of workability, I mean, I know from my own experience, having litigated so many of these cases, the court had come up with so many tests that nobody quite knew what to apply or what the rule was, that it didn't work. And the court has shown a willingness to abandon rules that don't work. I mean, that's part of the one of the niceties of our common law system is if something doesn't work, you know, the court has the ability to recognize that. And I mean, this is, as the court also pointed out, it has overruled incorrect decisions in the past. I mean, Plessy versus Ferguson was thrown out. That obviously was a doctrine that didn't work, that was wrong from the date it was decided. So, you know, when a decision is wrong, the court looks to see, you know, what was the original reasoning and can it stand. But that doesn't mean we're going to go around upsetting long-decided cases. This is just an extraordinary situation, I think, as Justice Alito explained. I'm
trying to put in, you know, I'm not a lawyer. I'm trying to put in simplistic terms that I can think of. You know, 50 years ago when they were deciding to put a man on the moon, and I know it was plus or minus, don't fact check me on that, but let's just say 50 years ago they decided to put a man on the moon, and the scientists sitting in the room miscalculated something, and we've been missing the moon for the last 50 years, and one day somebody says, oh, we got the math formula wrong. We got to go back and fix this, otherwise we're just going to keep missing the target. And they fix the formula and they go back and put it to where it should have been in the first place so it would be right from that point forward. Would that be a fair analogy of what's happened with the Supreme Court in 50 years worth of wrong rulings because they were determining it based on a wrong ruling 50 years ago?
I think that's right, and that's essentially what Justice Alito said when he said the moment that Roe was decided, it was on a collision course with the Constitution, and as a result, we have to correct it.
So why, and listen, Nick, I know the office you hold, and maybe Jerry and Dave want to jump in on this one, but if you can do it without, you know, getting yourself or your boss in trouble, that's fine. Why would justices on the Supreme Court rule wrong for 50 years, and it finally get to the point where justices that are currently sitting there would go back to what they could defend in law by being in the Constitution? Because one of the things that, and maybe this is more for you guys, one of the things that, you know, that the left is screaming about now is that these were Trump appointees and they'd made their decision long before they ever got on the bench. But if you're going to hold it to the Constitution, what the Constitution says, you can't make that argument and it be valid.
Well, I'd like to chime in on that. For one thing, I think from the very beginning when Roe was decided, all the other cases that came after it generally trimmed back on Roe. Planned Parenthood v. Casey, as much as we had hoped that that would be the one that would overturn Roe, it still gave the states more authority to regulate abortion. And so I think we've seen a progression in this direction for the last 50 years. But I think the surprising thing is, instead of trimming Roe a little bit more, the court just went out and cut it down. And same thing with Planned Parenthood v. Casey. So they took an action that most people, I don't believe, Nick, thought was going to happen. I don't know how you felt about it a year ago, but if you'd have asked me a year ago, I'd say, yeah, they'll probably dial it back some, but I doubt that they'll overturn Roe. Boy, was I wrong.
Dave?
Hey, work in the Supreme Court. If anybody thinks that there's not political leanings going on there, I'll sell you swampland. I really will. I mean, we've known from the word get-go that a lot of politics takes place in the Supreme Court. What I like to say is, I want to give all the credit in the world to the 6 judges that ruled against Roe for having the guts to do it with the way, I mean, look, somebody was wanting to take Kavanaugh's life. I mean,
Right.
think about it. They
That's
they
true.
stood up. They stood up and said, we're going to do what the Constitution says. And I give them all the credit in the world.
Well, I'm looking at Blaze Media. I kind of follow them, and the current trending is Antifa, who really ought to be determined as the enemy within, in my opinion. I mean, they aren't anything but
Absolutely.
they're cancer.
commies.
They're
Yeah.
commies.
Yeah.
Antifa, radical leftists reportedly call for night of rage in wake of Scottish abortion overturn. Enough is enough with peaceful protest. I don't know when they've ever peacefully protest. I mean,
Sure, not 2 years ago.
no. Well, when you got the mayor walking down the streets of Little Rock holding a sign with a group, and it turns into what it turned into as far as doing what
Right.
it did downtown. There's been nothing peaceful about the reaction of these groups, both in this or anything else that we've tried to stand
Guys,
up for.
the Family Council office, our office, is boarded up right now. We put OSB board on all the windows late yesterday, and I've told the staff, I said, we're not going to go back to the office until we know it's safe for us to be back in the office. So we're working from home for the time being until we see how this is going to pan out. So this is real stuff. The violence, the threat of violence is very, very real.
Yeah, I got a hold of John Thurston, the Secretary of State, just before we came on, and he says that things are going fine at Capitol. They had a demonstration last night, and to their credit,
It
very
was peaceful. That's
Right, that's right.
And that's, Nick, just take a drink of coffee for a second. And that's okay, kind of like the Attorney General said a while ago. The Constitution allows you the right to assemble peacefully in order to protest. Once you cross that line where it's not peaceful anymore, and I would classify that as either being violent toward anybody, spitting toward anybody, threatening anybody to where they feel like their life is in danger, jumping up and down on their car like they did to that poor guy in Chicago. Go figure, Chicago, that's where they did that, Democrat-controlled city. Then you've got, whether it's destroying windows, buildings, burning, whatever. Give credit to the group last night, and I want to be, let's be fair. The group that came to Little Rock last night, the Capitol Police were ready, and they did a great job securing the Capitol last night, and I'll give credit to the group that disagrees
They
with
did
the
well.
ruling.
Yeah.
Everybody did well, and thank God that's a positive reflection on Arkansas.
Absolutely. You know what I find interesting, where some of these protests are going on around the country, the really big ones like in L.A. and Chicago and places.
Arizona.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, in most of these places, guess what? Abortion is going to continue to be very legal.
Yes, it is.
They're acting as if somehow abortion is illegal now in California. It's illegal in New York, and that's not true. Every state gets to make their own laws. And we know what kind of laws they're going to make, and we know what kind we're going to make.
Right. And when people say, because it's out there on Facebook, when people say that this ruling doesn't reflect the majority of the citizens of Arkansas, I think history might prove you wrong.
I think so.
You're just grabbing at straws if that's your position.
Well, absolutely, because, we have a constitutional amendment that says that we're going to protect the life of every unborn child from conception until birth. And very few states have that. And that was voted in by a popular vote of the people of Arkansas.
Right.
All right, let me just say the two things. One of the things that they're yelling about is here in Arkansas, no provision for rape or incest. I don't know about other people. I will tell you, in the Elswick household, we discuss stuff like this, and we talk about how that the only innocent victim that gets punished in a rape is the unborn child, and their life is terminated. And all of my daughters have said that they would continue, they would have that child if a rape occurred. As far as incest, we don't worry about that because all my boys know exactly what would happen to them if that occurred.
But it starts in the home.
I believe that,
It
yes.
starts in the teaching at home, in the home environment. It starts with a dad being a dad and being a real man stepping up. And that's, I'm not going to be sitting here foolishly thinking that what I just said is going to stop it all. It's not. But here's the point. Let's do the percentages. The percentages of those that fall in that category. Listen, we're sensitive to that. In fact, what I'd love to do, and Nick, I'll just put it out there, Mississippi several years ago, if I remember right, introduced a bill for capital punishment for rape and for incest.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And, you know, if we want to protect the women, let's protect the women. If we're going to say it, let's go to the law with it, and let's take care of the perpetrator that would do such an insensitive, unmanly thing. If we're gonna protect them, let's protect them all the way. Dave, go ahead.
One other thing. I want to say, for you on the left, I'm happy that you figured out what a woman was already.
But, you know, guys, as far as the whole issue of rape and incest, that's one that I think we need to talk about more because, for one thing, we need to help people understand that there needs to be as much compassion as possible for the victim of rape, for the victim of incest. We never, ever want to turn and look the other way and say, well, just get over it. No, we need to be there for these folks, but we need to punish the perpetrator.
Absolutely.
Not the child. None of us thinks that you ought to be killed because of the circumstances of your conception, how you were conceived. We don't punish the children for the crimes of the father. And so there are a lot of basic principles there that we follow in a civilized society that we need to talk about, but we don't need to lose sight of the fact that we need to be very, very compassionate toward women who are victims of these terrible crimes.
Well, and, you know, you were on the show last week with, I think you were, you were. Were you?
I think so. I don't
Okay, I think
remember.
you were there last-
I've been
I
on
don't
so many
remember.
shows, I can't remember.
Yeah.
I remember Janet Dixon was here.
We're all old. We can't remember
Yeah.
anything anyway.
You know, I had Janet Dixon in here, and I had Susie Everett, and Janet brought.
Right,
you know,
I called
guests.
in.
Yeah,
I
you
called
called in.
in.
That's what it was. You were here in spirit.
Yeah.
But that, you know, like the pregnancy center, and the governor drew attention to that yesterday. We gave $1 million, and that's just the beginning. That's not like, here it is, we're done. I think we'll see more in the future. But this is where we step up and we come alongside individuals.
Absolutely.
And like Susie doing with Women Equip, you know, this is where, okay, we got this battle won, but the fight's not over because now we got to fight for those that have been victims.
If we're going to we've made abortion illegal, how about let's make it irrelevant?
Yeah, I
How about
love
let's
that.
make it
I
irrelevant?
like that statement. That's
And
very good.
we do that by helping women that are in these bad situations. I have a question for Nick, if he's still on the line. Nick, a lot of people have said Arkansas needs a rape incest exception in our law, and I'm not asking you to comment on whether you think that's a good or bad idea, but does that make any difference in how you defend the law? I mean, does that change anything?
So, at least with yesterday's decision, Justice Kavanaugh spoke sort of directly to what exceptions might still be required as a matter of due process. And Justice Kavanaugh said the only exception that's required under the Constitution is probably an exception for the life of the mother, which our law already contains. So, at least in terms of a federal constitutional matter, we've accomplished or we've created the exception that is all that's required. So, I defer to others on what exceptions should or should not exist, but at least as a legal matter right now, it appears based on what Justice Kavanaugh told us, that's the one exception that's probably required.
Yeah, I'm glad Nick pointed that out because there's a lot of erroneous information, big surprise, going on Facebook and things of that nature about women saying, well, what about ectopic pregnancies and the life of the mother? If the life of the mothers are in danger, abortion is offered if it's necessary.
Well, and if you read the law, it's pretty specific in there about what these medical emergencies, it's, Nick, I can't quote it verbatim, but it has some pretty specific language in there spelling out what this life of the mother situation would be like. Is that correct, or I haven't read the law in a while?
Yeah, so, we have, as you all know, we have more than one law that regulates abortion, and there is an exception for the life of the mother. It's a medical emergency in the trigger law, but there are other laws defining abortion that let's take the ectopic pregnancy example, that specifically define that as not abortion. I don't know too many people who would classify that as abortion, and Arkansas law doesn't classify that as abortion. So that question was asked yesterday at the press conference. I was somewhat surprised by that because it's not an abortion under Arkansas law.
Good answer.
Okay,
Yeah.
there it is.
And of course, the other side wants to talk about birth control and just a lot of peripheral issues. And Nick, I'd be interested to know how you size up this whole discussion about, well, now that the court has ruled this way on abortion, what about same-sex marriage? What about the LGBT issues and all that? And to me, it's a lot of scare tactics, but I just kind of like to get your take on that.
Yeah, and I think the court went out of its way to address this kind of thing. I mean, the court knew this was going to happen. This type of mischaracterization would keep happening. And I believe it's page 37, 38 of the opinion. Justice Alito goes out of his way to say, look, this is about abortion. We're analyzing a specific claim that there's a constitutional right to abortion. That claimed right is not rooted in the history of this country. This country did not recognize it prior to Roe being decided. Roe invented it on the full cloth. Mm-hmm. So that's what we're looking at. We're not talking about other rights. We're not looking at other rights. So that's what the majority, I think, says pretty clearly. Now, I understand people pointed Justice Thomas in his concurrence says, we might want to look at other things. I mean, it's always true that anytime there's a decision in the law, it will have impact in other areas of the law. But I think with this one, again, as Justice Alito said, this was about abortion. It was about a very specific claim, and there simply is no federal constitutional right to abortion.
But
and that's what the majority said.
But the one thing I think it has opened up the door to that has not been opened before is this court is looking at it strictly from a constitutional view. They are looking at it without, at least on this issue, I think what was ruled like in New York. I think that we are in a window of opportunity to where the court is looking at it on what could be defended to any reasonable-minded person, that it is based strictly on the interpretation of the Constitution absent of anything else.
Understand that Ginsburg herself said that Roe was standing on weak ground, and she expected it to be overturned.
But nobody expected it to be where we are right now in this generation of Supreme Court justices that would have the strength, spiritually, morally, all other areas of strength to do it. And I think that's what's probably shocked the other side is they didn't think anybody would do it, and these justices have done it.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Nick, you may not be able to speak to this very clearly, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. Where do you think Arkansas stands in this whole debate and defending our laws and so forth? Where do we stand in comparison to the rest of the country, especially the other states that are kind of in our camp when it comes to restricting abortion? Have you had a chance to look at what's going on elsewhere and where we fit into all that?
I can tell you based on conversations I had yesterday, there are AGs and SGs around the country who were all analyzing the decisions yesterday, trying to read what it means for our abilities to defend our laws. I mean, I know that, we've been named the most pro-life state for more than 1 year in a row, and I know the AG is very proud of our efforts in our office to defend our pro-life laws. I mean, we even prior to this had been unusually successful at defending our laws. I argued, for instance, our dismemberment ban and got an injunction against that overturned. It was really, unfortunately, it was blocked again by the same district court judge, but we managed to get overturned once. My predecessor argued the Medicaid funding cutoff for abortion providers, which was another large victory for our office. So, we've had a lot of success. Now we're even in a better position, and we were one of the first states to totally ban abortion because we were both ready because the legislature had made us ready and because the AG had said to us, this is a priority, let's be ready. So we were able to act quickly. we are, in some sense, I think, as Jerry alluded to, better positioned because we have a state constitutional amendment as well, which means, arguments that people might be able to make in other states about whether their state constitution recognizes an abortion right. Again, that argument just isn't, it's not plausible, it's not reasonable in Arkansas given the state constitution. So in that sense, we are better situated than some other states.
Okay, I want to ask a question. Yeah, Nick, I want to ask a question, and if you just say no comment, Jerry and Dave, and I'll pick it up and go for there for just a second. So you got district court judges that are getting the first bite at the apple on these things. Now, the Supreme Court has said, you know what, we've been wrong, we're going to make it right. I guess my question would be, these district court judges, they're making all these determinations, why would they have not figured it out before the Supreme Court figured it out? And if they have been wrong, would it be right, would it be fair to say, what is it that motivated you to make a determination that now has been substantiated by the Supreme Court as being wrong? Why could you have not figured that out?
Man, if I can get him on the air, I'll ask him that question.
Okay. Nick, was that a no comment, or what was that?
I'll give you the simple legal answer. I mean, look, lower courts are bound by the court above them. So I take the Mississippi case, for instance. In the Mississippi case, the district court judge blocked it. It was appealed to the Fifth Circuit, which is more conservative courts in the country. The Fifth Circuit, even with a panel with fairly conservative judges, said, look, even if we think Roe was incorrect, if Casey was wrong, we are bound by Supreme Court authority. Now, we can say that we think the Supreme Court got this wrong, but ultimately they are bound by the upper court. So it is up to the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn them. And the good, part of this is the good news for everybody is, so far what we've seen around the country is that lower court judges are now following the law of the land. So, for instance, in Alabama, Alabama's ban on abortion has been blocked by a district court in Alabama. Myron Thompson, who's a federal district court judge there, who's one of the more liberal judges in the country, I think, had enjoined a number of abortion laws in the state of Alabama. Judge Thompson vacated those injunctions yesterday. So Alabama's total ban, or nearly total ban, went into effect yesterday. So what you're now seeing is the lower court judges are abiding by the Supreme Court's decision. And that's just the way our system works.
But there is and this might be for you all the way in, there is strategy involved in where you pass a law in order to get it in front of a court that historically has ruled one way or the other. And maybe that's what gave Mississippi the best shot at this, is that because it was going to take the path that it took, it had that option to get up to the Supreme Court. Y'all got any thoughts?
Well, there's been a strategy among pro-life advocacy groups for a number of years to try to pass laws at the state level that will work their way up through the system. And so it wasn't that a lot of these laws were just passed haphazard. For example, our 18-week ban here in Arkansas was passed in conjunction with a similar effort in Utah. And the idea behind that was to possibly create a split decision between circuits. Now, the Mississippi law got there ahead of our 18-week law and ahead of the Utah law, but that strategy has been out there for a long time to try to pass good laws that will position the court to take another shot at Roe, and guess what? They did.
They did. Mm-hmm. Hey, Nick, let me ask you about something the Attorney General said a while ago, and I just need some understanding. Your certification process was a determination that y'all had reviewed the Supreme Court's ruling, and you had reached the conclusion that you agree with what they determined. And then the question that popped in my mind was, what if you hadn't? What would you have done then procedurally had you not agreed? And let's say that other rulings come out of the Supreme Court that you may.
Well, so I think what it is we had to make a determination, the AG had to make a determination under the statute whether or not the court had in fact overturned the core holding of Roe and Casey, not whether we agreed with the holding or not, but whether or not it had in fact done that. And on this one, there really wasn't there wasn't a reasonable argument the court hadn't done that, because the court made very clear that Roe was incorrect and in conflict with the Constitution the day it was decided. and Casey was equally incorrect. And I think the terminology the court used was it merely perpetuated Roe's errors. So this one wasn't a close call. We take that obligation. I know the AG took that obligation very seriously. The lawyers in my department took it very seriously to make sure, we read what the court said and understood it. But on this one, it was very clear what the court has held.
Nick, one thing that just occurred to me is that, Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey are not the only federal U.S. Supreme Court rulings regarding abortion. There was Doe v. Bolton, there was the Carhart case, I believe, and others. Can you speak to what would be the status of those cases now? Does this render all that moot, or how does that work?
So to the extent that those cases rely on the core holding of Roe and Casey, which are the cases that recognize the right to an abortion or the viability standard, to the extent that they rely on that core holding, those cases too have been overruled. Now there may be, in each of those cases, there are other issues that are also presented which may still exist. And I don't, it's going to take some time to work through all the implications of the court's decisions in the court's decision in other areas. But with respect to the extent that they rely on a constitutional right to abortion, they have now been overruled.
Good. All right. I want to go back and hit on one point, and then Nick, probably for the rest of the show, it's going to be Dave and Jerry and me, because you probably don't need to be conversing on the rest of what I want to talk to them about. Does this?
My wife has had our kids, so I'll be happy to drop off at that point.
Tell her the Dave Elswick and Kim Hammer listening audience and Jerry Cox fans, we are very, very appreciative.
Yes.
Take her, go get her a Route 44. Yes. So does this, if you can answer this, does this signal? And the reason I keep saying that to the listening audience, I don't want to put the AG's office or Nick in a position that would compromise anything we're doing or anything in the future, okay? So I just kind of want to keep that back door open to step out. But does this signal, in your opinion, that the Supreme Court will be returning more matters to the state now that the most controversial, the greatest decision that has been made in my lifetime is now settled?
From the Roberts Court, even if you go back to the Rehnquist Court, which was the Chief Justice Rehnquist before Chief Justice, has shown a trend toward correcting the decisions of earlier courts to the states and their elected representatives thereof. And I think, again, Justice Alito's opinion makes that very clear when he says, this is the kind of thing that's supposed to be decided at the state level by elected representatives, and courts should have never taken this out of the hands of the states and the people thereof where it belonged.
Well, let's hope that the trend maintains and goes to the future. I'm going to let you drop off because the next question I'm going to ask you don't need to be involved in. But tell you what, thank you, and Nick, appreciate you giving up time to be on the Kim Hammer Show today, and just congratulations to you and the Attorney General on the great work that you've done.
Thank you for all the work that you guys have done. You guys are amazing.
Keep it up.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Nick's off the line, so here's my concern, my worry. Between now and November or January, when we officially get control of the Congress, what's going to be the speed of which they're going to try to stack the court or attack the court and try to do anything, or do you think there's even a pathway for them to be able to do that?
No, there's not a pathway for that. It won't happen.
Because that's one of the concerns people have expressed.
But I think they're going to pander to their base.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you think?
It makes sense.
President Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, they're all going to talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and,
how important your vote will be in November.
But
yeah,
I hope they
course.
do. I hope they do, because if you look at a map where people are moving out of states and which states they're moving into, there's an obvious migration that people are moving to conservative states. And if they'll just keep doing what they're doing, I would hope and pray to God we better have a slam dunk in the fall. And then when we do have a slam dunk, we better do something with it.
Here's what I've been wondering, guys, is these pro-abortion states like California and New York, I wonder if they're going to double down and pass some really extreme pro-abortion laws for their states. And I don't
already
know, I don't
begun.
know how much more extreme they can get, but there seems to be no limits. And so I'm wondering if they're going to take, like we've gone one direction, if they're going to go the other way,
Hey.
totally.
Maryland, looking at a law, hasn't passed, but they're looking at a law, abortion up to 1 year of age.
That's what I was about to say.
That kind of stuff.
I mean,
yeah.
that is genocide. I mean, that is.
It's a fratricide. That's
Yeah.
exactly what
Yeah.
it is.
Here's the other thing. I know we're kind of jumping all over, Kim.
Yeah, we got about 8 minutes.
But I will tell you, when we say pro-life, we're also talking about the end of life.
That's correct.
Elderly.
And the elderly and
We're
the
all in that group.
infirmed, and the folks that are not that are in a bad way. So we need to be really careful that we don't say, "Wow, we won the pro-life battle." Well, we're winning on the abortion front, but we need to look at the other end of life and say we want to be sure we respect life at the end also.
Somebody'd have to have their head in the sand to think that the other side is throwing up the white flag and going to
Oh, no.
Oh,
I think we just threw
No.
gas. We just threw gas on the fires. What happened?
turn on the network news, and I mean, you talk about preaching a gospel, a message. They're doing it.
Well, it's their holy litany that they follow on the left.
Well, and to that point, what you just said, you kind of tongue-in-cheeked it, but the reality is, as I think about the return of the Lord and the condition of the world, you know, that which is wrong is right, that which is right is wrong. In
Right.
the end, it'll be evil. All those scriptures that indicate not so much to a specific situation, but to a specific environment. And we are definitely in an environment at the latter day where we are squaring up for a fight. And what I'm afraid of, just to be quite honest and not to create fear or panic in the streets, but the reality is, one of my guests I'm going to have on in the next week or two, Dave, is the guy that the pro-life clinics have been firebombed. You know, when you start identifying that your principles are associated with the Bible and with God, why would anybody think that you're not on the list because you're basing your belief and your set of values
on top
on the
of
Bible?
what you're saying, I want to see how it plays out in the church itself.
Well, and see, that's a point, Dave, that we cannot lose. Okay, so we've made abortion mostly illegal. What about the hearts and minds of people?
You're exactly right.
What about the demand for abortion? It's still there. And it behooves us to figure out how do we change hearts and minds out here among the community, because Kim, you know, you guys can pass a lot of laws, but people's hearts and minds, that's another issue.
Adam said that our Constitution was only made for a moral people.
And moral and religious.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I want to, let's put the pressure on the church now. This is where the church, like the Bible says, the fields are wide unto harvest. If ever there was a time that the church, and I'll get into the definition of church on another show, but this is the opportunity for Christianity to step up and show the love of God and say, look, we have a pathway forward. And I think this is where we as churches that are united on the side of this thought process, which some churches are not. They're divided.
Yep.
But for the half that's aligned in this thought process, this is not where we push people down. This is where we pick them up and love them and say,
But there's
let
still
us
going to be a
help you.
threshing. I'm just telling you.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
going to be a threshing about this. There's three cheap type of people in a church. There are unbelievers. There are, of course, carnal Christians, and then there are spirit-believing Christians.
Right.
The spirit-believing Christians, I'm not worried about. It's the carnal and non-believers that I'm worried about.
You know, I would urge everybody listening just to think about this in church tomorrow, those of you who attend church. Is this issue going to be mentioned at all?
It will
in
in
your
New
church.
Life Church.
In your
I
church.
talked to Rick Bizet about it.
And you know, some places it will. It'll be front and center.
Yes, it
In
will.
others, it will be as if it never happened.
That's
And
true.
some will be afraid to bring it up because
That's right.
it's going to flush out what the church is really made of. And
That's right.
that's where we are. And I think that's where the Lord said, I'd rather be hot or cold, but if you're lukewarm, you might as well be out of here.
Yeah, we're taking your candlestick, bud.
And if your pastor doesn't bring it up or nobody says anything about it, you might ask them very respectfully, why? Why didn't you talk about it?
Well, and here's the deal. Tell me what the Bible says. Mm-hmm. I mean, tell me what the Bible says about it, because if you want to argue with what the Bible says, you got to take it up with God.
Well,
I'm just telling you what he says.
that's the
Take it up
truth.
with God, man.
The Bible is the truth. You know, everybody tells me my truth. There ain't no such thing as my truth. There's the Bible truth, and then there's a whole lot of conjecture and opinions.
Well, and hey, Steve, call the next show up and tell them they've been bumped. But you know, the left is using mischaracterization,
Yes,
which is
they
the
are.
same thing as lies, and lies are not of God, lies are of the devil. And so if you're believing what they're saying in mischaracterization, whether it's, you know, in the media or whether it's Pelosi or whatever, you can't say you're worshiping the same God and be spewing out lies. You know, bitter water, sweet water can't come out of the same spigot.
Well, and you know, there's deep delusion out there on the part of people that are in this pro-choice movement, and the truth hurts when they hear that, when they hear the truth, and it's hard to swallow because they have so believed that lie.
But it's hard for Christians to swallow the truth too. And you know, this is again, and I mean, we're being very passionate because it's a passionate topic. But really, again, this is where the church needs to step up
Yeah,
and show
absolutely.
and take the mischaracterization that has been cast upon us by others and say, no, let us show you by our actions what we are, and get involved in the pregnancy centers and support kind of causes where women will know and families will know that we're here to love you and we're here to support you.
You know, a lot of the women who seek abortions
Down to a minute and a half.
feel like they're backed against the wall and they have nowhere to go, nowhere to turn. And it's up to us as people who are pro-life and Christians to give them a path forward that doesn't lead to abortion.
I did this when I was a lot younger, but we had a bedroom that we allowed to be used to put teenage girls that had been thrown out of their homes that found themselves, of course, pregnant, and we took care of them. And that's what we got to do.
Let's get back to Bible basics.
Sounds good.
All right. Hey, it's been a fast hour. I appreciate you guys taking time out on Saturday. This is live today, not pre-recorded. Appreciate you being here. Thank you to Attorney General Rutledge. Who you got on the show real quick, Monday? Hurry up, Dave.
Rose will be on, RNC will be on. We're hoping still to have the governor on.
Jason Raper's coming up.
He's
at some
coming
point.
on.
Yeah, and let's mention Jason Raper is the one that passed this bill. So let's make sure we give credit where credit's due.
That's right.
And it's a team effort. And I'll say this: who gets the credit? Who gets the glory? God. And He's a big God that can handle whatever's going to be thrown at Him. So you can handle whatever's going to be thrown at you if you serve and worship God. Go out and proclaim. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to Kim Hammer Show. KimHammerShow.com. Go up there, you can catch this. I'm on all the podcasts, Spotify, and all those platforms. Go up there and catch the show too. Share it with your friends, and we'll continue to put out
1.1 FM, The Answer. KDXE FM, Kamak Village, Little Rock. A Salem Media Group station. 101.1 FM, The Answer.
Any examples used are for illustrative purposes only and do not take...
I mean, I asked him questions I really wanted to know the answer to. You know, and so it was, I enjoyed being able to have him on there.
All I'll say is this. I didn't think I'd ever see this in my lifetime.
You know,
I thank
me
God
either.
that I get to see it.
Me too. I thought, maybe
You
someday.
never cease to amaze. You're not a radio guy at all, and you talk right up to the post. Every time. Every stinking time. I'm telling you. Yeah, that's right.
Because I preach every Sunday, and if I don't quit by noon, they're walking out, buddy. I mean, it's over. They're walking out.
They're lucky you're not Paul.
Huh?
They're lucky you're not Paul.
Oh, yeah, he would.
Somebody fall asleep and fall out of a window or something like
And
that.
die and be brought back to life again to hear the rest of
He
it.
didn't stop preaching while they did it. It was like, one bite she done, that's pretty good.
So Monday, I just need to show up on 7:15
Yeah,
or
yeah.
20 or 30 or something or whatever.
It'll be fine.
All right. Is Jason going to be here in studio?
I think he's gonna be fine.
Okay. The reason, I mean, it's okay if he is. Jason and I just haven't crossed paths since the big
Blow up.
whatever. Yeah. I did text him and thanked him for all the good work he's done. And he sent me a nice text back. So,
Well,
I think he's calmed down.
hey,
he